Surprise! Hi, Melanin Royalties. My name is Janik, and welcome back to the Melanin Child Podcast on Raymondays. Also, welcome to the new year 2022. Now, today is not Monday, but I decided to host this episode today for two special reasons. One, today, on February 22nd, we are celebrating the 43rd anniversary of the independence of St. Lucia from Great Britain. And two, today marks the 1 year anniversary since my last podcast. Okay, so I definitely owe you guys an apology and an explanation as to why I took the break. So, around this time last year, I was actually preparing to present on independence. And then at that time, I was being ambushed with a lot of work. And work is not limited to like my job. I'm talking about like personal work with myself and stuff of that sort. So I thought the best thing to do at the time would just take a step back and just come back in the next month. But then the next month turned to 3 months, turned to 6 months, turned to a whole year. And I would like to apologize for taking that big break. Over the last day, I've received many comments and complaints from friends and peers as to why I stopped the podcast, and I appreciate you guys for encouraging me to continue speaking out on these issues. Okay, so today the topic I'd like to speak on is independence, insignia or freedom. I'm somebody who is patriotic with a capital P. St. Lucia is the most alluring, culturally diverse, captivating island nation in the Caribbean and the world. There's just no place like St. Lucia. So when we speak about and when I hear topics on independence, I get really excited. A lot of people are unaware of their position on the independent spectrum in relation to whether they support independence or not. Now, I try not to jump on backs of people with opinions which stray much further than mine because we are all entitled to formulate and discuss our own opinions. But for me, I always say that we live in a shambolic society which is characterized by partiality and iniquity. Therefore, being neutral or saying you choose not to support independence when being asked, to me, it just equates to weakness. If you're comparing political parties and you come to the conclusion that you will be neutral because you like neither of them, that's different. But having freedom and being independent is literally our form of resistance against colonialism. So to me, being neutral or choosing not to celebrate independence is a form of coonery. I hear a lot of people say, like, I don't support independence or I don't see why we're independent. They don't really get the relevance of it and the significance. One of the issues that I have with St. Lucians is that we are inordinately relaxed. Imagine being alive a couple centuries ago. You're challenging a first world global superpower by demanding your emancipation from slavery. Then you fight so hard you receive it. Then you challenge another major superpower. Then you achieve emancipation again. But they forced you into 2 long centuries of agony and torment. Then getting your independence, only for your descendants in the present to be unappreciative of your struggles. I'm sorry that some of you may not have been or may not be educated on these topics, but at the end of the day, we need to comprehend that in this type of society that we live in, we cannot afford to be heavily relaxed. We live in a third world country, and if you don't see the need to celebrate something as small as independence, you are clearly too privileged to experience the pressures of this biased world. And you are clearly oblivious to your history and your surroundings. What did your ancestors survive for? I'm not saying all the survival attempts of our people will be lost if we choose not to celebrate independence on only one day. But if you cannot remain devoted to spending just one day, just one, observing the freedom your generations fought and endured so many years of slavery for, then they should have truly not endured all these years of trauma for your sake. There comes a point where we need to stop making excuses and we need to go support and educate each other. Because in the cataclysmic world that we live in, all we have is God, our culture, and each other. And until we take the time to realize that, we ain't going nowhere, and that's just how it is, like point blank period. But for me, independence has definitely been the most challenging topic to discuss because there are still elements of slavery, post-colonialism, and Everything that forced us to be dependent on our oppressors, which exist in our cultures and societies today. So I'll spend a lot of time trying to figure out the style of which I would present on independence and which particular elements I should present on. In addition to that, we have to acknowledge the fact that we live in a very multi ethnic and multiracial society. So we, as a people, need to clearly define who is independence for. Y'all didn't see that one coming. I'm not going to surmise that independence is more significantly important to one or two groups of people in our society, but we have to be mindful that there are native Indians, which were nearly wiped out by the Europeans, then the West Africans, which were kidnapped and carried here via the Middle Passage, the Caucasians, which were the offspring of the planters and the slave masters, then the Indians, which chose to come across to the island during the indentureship. Of course, people who freely leave their homelands, let's say from other islands in the region or the first world countries, to come across here to, live and build better lives for themselves. And of course, you have the individuals who are mixed from one or two of these groups that I have mentioned. So as much as you look at your country's statistics, demographics, and they'll tell you, well, St. Lucia is 80% black or 10% white, so no whatnot. You have a lot of people in these percentages who are mixed. So you could be biracial, it's not limited to just black people. Then, also the people who came, you have black people that were probably direct descendants of West Africans, direct descendants of, let's say, West Africans with Caribs, and then you have people when you look at the interaction between the West Africans with the Europeans, you have the people who are the coloreds, the Sabines, you have the mulattoes, and you have the mestizos, etc., etc. So it's not limited to just one or two races and one or two ethnicities and one or two cultures. It's an accumulation of them all. If you're from the Caribbean, not only St. Lucia, you are not one race. You are a buoy of several races. And that's something we have to accept. But the fact of the matter is, as much as we may all agree that we observe, independence celebration for the single cause that we were partially liberated from the British throne on the 22nd of February 1979, so that we may be able to live in peace as one and to govern our country under our own conditions. The magnitude of independence differs throughout the many groups of people in this land simply because our experiences and the experiences that our ancestors endured are and were all different. Now, I'm not stating that let's say you're a wealthy Caucasian man, a wealthy white man with a history of slave masters and planters which took advantage of black natives in the country in your ancestry, and you now currently live in St. Lucia. That automatically means that you shouldn't be allowed to celebrate independence. I'm not saying that, because we must think of it the other way around. Because what if you're a rich black woman which came from a poor family? Would it be okay to say, well, she can celebrate independence because she's black and she's from a poor family, and he can't because he's white and he's from a rich family? In my opinion, the answer is no. The fact of the matter is, independence isn't and should not be dependent on economic status, ethnic identity, nor race. But you have to perform an evaluation on yourself. Dive into your history and examine how you and your forefathers have been tyrannized and exploited by the slavery and oppression, the very things that ignited the fire inside of them to challenge the European figureheads, demanding their freedom. The fight to say that they want to be independent. Because if you don't do that, the legacies, the struggles, and the cultural heritage that our ancestors fought to create and preserve will be held in vain and completely erased. And furthermore, if you don't know the reason you're celebrating independence, you don't have a reason. What are you celebrating independence for? That's why, therefore, in relation to the comments I made about the rich Caucasian man, if you're somebody like this who is not only non-native, but also someone with no affiliations to the predecessors which protested for the freedom of this land, or you have no connections, or you cannot relate to the struggles and challenges which the natives here have been subjected to through centuries of slavery and post colonialism, then your view of independence simply cannot be measured next to the St. Lucians, who are the byproducts of slaves and struggle through the post colonial societies. Byproducts of slaves and struggle. If you knew where your ancestors came from, you would carry a certain level of patriotism and national pride because the journey towards freedom has not been easy. And notice I said has, it is still going on. We have not achieved freedom yet. We still have the slavery mindsets, we have the colonial mindsets. We have systems put in place which are said to be there for our best interest, but then you have many people who are suffering. So we have not reached a level of freedom yet to be relaxed. The journey towards freedom has not been easy, but the initiatives made by the ancestors to oppose all the discrimination and biased treatments they bestowed unto our people laid the foundation for us St. Lucians to rally together and smash racism and the currently existing byproducts of slavery head front. All we have to do is stand by each other and fight. Now, it's very difficult from that point to determine who exactly this applies to. And believe me when I say that I'm not trying to create division. To me, two of the major factors that influence who the bias applies to and who independence is a bit more pertinent to are: one, how many benefits you receive from the biases in society, and two, how often do you use those biases to your advantage. Now you're probably wondering, what exactly does Yannick mean by biases in society? Or probably why I'm even speaking about the existence of biases when biases exist in all societies worldwide. Allow me to perform an illustration in your head. We know about the existence of the pre-indigenous people, the Caribs and the Arawaks, whose lands were pillaged and whose populations were wiped out after the arrival of the Europeans. The Europeans then introduced chattel slavery after enslaving and kidnapping millions of blacks from West Africa via the Middle Passage to build, the Western societies and to work and be tortured on West Indian plantations. Now, we know that the assimilation of West African culture in St. Lucia in order to meet the Eurocentric ideals have been one of the biggest schemes of the British Empire in St. Lucia for the past centuries. Then we were forced to live in an unbalanced, cataclysmic society where the natives who quicker met the Eurocentric standards of beauty and submission were treated with less oppression and given certain benefits over the heavy majority. The vile beast that is racism went on to birth numerous unequitable social issues like colorism, classism, texturism, featureism, you know them. All of these laid the foundation for the antagonism towards native solutions, particularly those of Afro-Caribbean or Black descent, especially those in rural areas and communities. Now, to me, it would be unfair to say that if you benefited from racism and its byproducts, you should not be entitled to celebrate independence. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're somebody that's oblivious and not willing to acknowledge and accept the privilege which functions in your favor to support the individuals who receive the short end of the stick, then you celebrating independence is pointless. You're essentially fighting a battle on the side of the oppressors. Because privilege is the greatest enemy of what is right. You should be using the privilege that you have received to develop and advance people who the system simply does not favor, so that we may become a much more powerful and dynamic society. Once you don't perform this evaluation, independence will be nothing but an ordinary day to you. And a lot of you may have realized that when I speak on this topic, I don't only use points centered on the very day, the very February 22nd that we celebrate independence. Because independence, emancipation, and the traditional festivities we observe are all tied to our cultural identity Because as much as they comment at different points in our history, and they were, different and unique rationales, they are all related to the resistance of our people from oppression to exist in tranquility, artistry, expressiveness, and freedom. I'm so thankful for this moment right here because God just gave me an epiphany. I probably had like 46 pages of notes and 8 voice tapings on this topic last year when I originally planned recording the episode. But I had a really bad writer's block. I didn't feel as if I would have presented the topic well. And I actually don't have my book with me, with my notes. I don't have my recordings. But he just moved the clouds from my mind and made me realize like the best way to describe and define independence is in the simplest terms. Independence is one of the most important features of our cultural identity, and that is that. If you look at independence as a day in the year, just February 22nd, and that's it will not matter to you. Go to the dictionaries and they will tell you independence is the state of being self reliant and self sufficient. Until you truly invest time to comprehend what it's like and what it was like to not be in control of every little aspect of your being down to your very own freedom, independence will always be pointless to you. Like that statement, independence is one of the most important features of our cultural identity. It's just so weighty. Like it carries so much power in it. And until you reach a certain level of intellect, it will not make sense to you because it really is a weighty statement. And the thing is, it's up to you to go out and educate yourself. Go ask the questions to your parents, go ask your grandparents, ask the elders about the relevance of this celebration. And while you're out there, take time to treasure the elements of culture and the practices that are also tied to independence, which exist today. Do not let our culture die out. By now, we should know that the world doesn't work in our favor. Oftentimes, I satire some Caribbean nations because honestly, I don't feel like they advocate enough for St. Lucian history. You go to school and you learn the history of the same three countries, and it's nothing exciting, nothing fun. It's just the same boring history. You have to ask yourself at some point, why is our history always overlooked? You heard them say several times, 7 times British, 7 times French. Two global superpowers fighting for a tiny landmass, St. Lucia, for over a century. You need to go out there and find out why. Why were they fighting? Why was the British at one point willing to trade the entire colony of Canada for small St. Lucia? Go out and find why. Why did the French grant St. Lucian emancipation from slavery in the 1700s when every other British Caribbean colony still had slavery? Go out and find out why. Go out and find out about the revolts and the rebellions that the St. Lucians fought against the Europeans and were successful about that are not taught in Caribbean history. It is up to you to find out why. And we need to stop skylarking and give recognition to the Creole language. We need to find the true significance of carnival. We need to revitalize cultural acts like masquerading. We need to show greater appreciation to Je ne Creole and the Creole men. We need to take Emancipation Day seriously. And of course, we need to come out and be patriotic on February 22nd every year. I often side-eye and refrain from activities circulated around Independence Day because, to me, they can be very pointless. I like the events that the Royal Police Force engage in. I like the fact that there is a parade and there's an address from the Prime Minister. I get that we have to be diplomatic. I like that. But my thing is, we need to take several steps further to make Independence Day and, life on a whole in St. Lucia from that much more vibrant. To me, to ask to be pardoned from the ruling of the British throne, just to do everything the exact same way the system was defined, defeats the purpose of celebrating. We need to make it a day to really honor our predecessors and exhibit our culture. It needs to be colorful, regardless of who is watching. I feel like St. Lucians like to hide themselves, hide their patriotism because they're not on the same level with certain countries they compare themselves. You cannot compare yourself with the United States of America. That makes no sense. You cannot look at England and be like, oh wow, Challenger could never. Like, I don't think we could. Like, even in the Caribbean, you need to understand that, every country has its history. Every country has its way of doing its own unique thing. So you have to be very careful not to compare. And you have to be careful, like, don't refrain from celebrating your culture because you see another culture doing something differently. Like, to me, how are you celebrating Halloween but not your independence? It's pointless. It's very pointless. It makes no sense. We need to get to a point where we say, hey world, this is our day for observing our culture, our freedom. We will do things our own unique way, and nothing will be done to prevent us from doing so. And we also need to invest time highlighting national heroes. To me, national heroes and icons should not be limited to Nobel laureates and politicians, because there are certainly more people which pioneered the move towards freedom and development, not only under the umbrella of diplomacy, but also in the personal areas of influence we tend to overlook, such as sexism, colorism, racism, poverty. We live in a hyper-patriarchal society. It's a shame how we have refused to highlight women who have made strides in St. Lucia towards freedom. You probably would not have ever known that there was a woman that was once the head of a political party in St. Lucia. I understand, and I also agree that we must pay reverence to those who came before us and made great achievements. So yes, thank you to Sir John Compton, thank you to Sir George Charles, thank you to Sir Derek Walker, thank you to Sir Arthur Lewis, and the list goes on. To all the legends from the earlier chapters of our history, thank you. But there comes a point where we must ask ourselves, if the only people who are highlighted and respected to their contributions to our society as heroes are those who came 10, 20, 30 years ago and are just currently politicians today, then are we really progressing as an independent society, or have we gone nowhere? Have we moved? It's time we start investing into our culture, into our people, and celebrating the freedom we have, where seeds were sown from the struggles of our ancestors. We need to come out and design frameworks to clearly define principles from which individuals can be awarded representative tokens of gratification for supporting and fighting for social development and equity and everything of that sort. St. Lucians are very easily influenced by culture, popular culture. So I know it will be a task. I know a lot of people look towards the popular figures and icons in society to see if they will be celebrating independence. I will do it too. But like I said, we need to get to a point where we start to develop independent mindsets from these mentalities and realize that all we have, each other, our culture, and God. So the best thing we could do and the best thing to help us grow, unite, and celebrate the achievements and the struggles made by those who came before us on Independence Day. Because independence is truly an insignia of our freedom. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of my podcast. I will see you next time. My name is Janik. This is the Melanin Child Podcast. Goodbye.